Hello, everybody. My name is Jackie Encinas. I am a Adopt a Stream program assistant. If you haven't seen me before, it is nice to virtually see you. And if you're a returning Confluence member, then welcome back to this evening's water science research session. So in case you missed the intro slides at the beginning, this session is being recorded. So like I said, be sure to keep your videos off if you don't want to appear on screen. We ask that you please remain muted while our presenters have the floor, and use the chat box if you have any questions during their presentations. If you would like to change your meeting view, then you can do so in the upper right-hand corner of your screen and toggle between speaker view and gallery view. And we also ask that you stick around at the end of the session for about 15 minutes or so. We'll have a networking opportunity and also a prize drawing for our attendees. So that's really exciting, and we hope you stick around with us for that.
Thanks, Jackie. My name is Bailey Craps. I am an Adopt a Stream state coordinator, so happy to be here with y'all this evening. Before we get started, I just wanted to, let you guys know if anyone's unfamiliar with Adopt a Stream, or maybe this is your first time joining us for Confluence. Our program is a citizen science program that trains volunteers to monitor the water quality of Georgia's diverse waterways. And we have an annual conference every year that you're now a part of. So thanks for joining us and making our 2021 conference amazing. We're thankful you're here, and we're excited to hear from about these researches today.
Yes, thanks, Bailey. So this is our water science session, and this is a special opportunity for students and volunteers to share their water science and citizen monitoring projects with the rest of the Adopt a Stream community. So tonight we are joined by 3 presenting groups ranging from volunteers, high school students, and undergraduate students. And we will be hearing about 3 fantastic research projects about targeted monitoring of an impaired stream, evaluating water quality to assess the impact of waste transfer facilities on stormwater drainage systems, and the effects of submersible aquatic plants on stream water quality. So today's session is a little bit different than what our normal sessions are. It's set up as a research speed rounds. So each presenting group is going to have about 10 minutes to present their research, and then we will have about 5 minutes at the end for questions. So that's when we can, we'll facilitate the questions that are in the chat box. We can also have our attendees unmute themselves and ask their questions directly if you'd rather have that. So each presenting group will have about 15 minutes to deliver an elevator pitch of their research. And we just ask that while they're presenting, please keep yourself muted. You can have your videos on if you'd like, but they will be presenting, and we want to make sure we give them our undivided attention. So let's get started with our first presenters, our first group. We have a trio. And I apologize if I mispronounce your names, but they are Priya and Raya Badani and Arkhana Seth. And they are on the call. So if you all want to put on your videos. Hello.
Hello.
Hello. And I'm sorry, can you all say your names for us?
Yeah, it's Pragya Badani.
Pragya Badani. I apologize.
It's okay.
But it's so good to see all of you.
And
I'm Ria. We were the presenters.
Yeah.
Well, hello, welcome. So I'll just say a quick little introduction for you guys, and then you can go ahead and get started. So this is our first presenting group, and they entered on the volunteer level. They received their first certifications in 2019, but have been actively monitoring with AdoptAstream with their group Clean and Beautiful. And they even won this year's Red Flag Award. So congratulations, you guys. Our award ceremony was earlier today. So I was able to see your acceptance video. So congratulations again, you guys. So the floor is yours. Feel free to start your presentation and to share your screen.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Pragya Bhadani,
I'm Ria Vadani.
and we are volunteers with AdoptAstream. Today, we'll be telling you about our AdoptAstream monitoring project, Targeted Monitoring at Level Creek. There is a designated use for every water body, such as drinking water, recreational activity, and fishing. An impaired water body is a water body that does not support its designated purpose, and this can be for several reasons, one of them being urban runoff. To determine which water bodies in Georgia are impaired, every 2 years, members of the Georgia Environmental Protection Division gather data on all the water bodies in Georgia. They compile that information into a report colloquially known as the Impaired Waters List. Currently, there are over 20 streams in Gwinnett County that are impaired. Gwinnett County Source Identification Program focuses on locating and removing pollutant sources within impaired watersheds. To do this, members of the SID program monitor impaired water bodies at multiple locations on a monthly basis for at least 2 years. After 2 years, they reevaluate the water body's health and determine if they can delist the stream or sections of the stream.
However, the SID program can only monitor 4 to 5 streams at a time. So citizen scientists must be involved in monitoring impaired streams to increase the likelihood of streams being delisted. This is where targeted monitoring comes in. Targeted monitoring is a volunteer program which complements the SID program by adding more streams. Citizen scientists like us collect data from impaired streams at multiple locations in order to identify sources of pollution. We do targeted monitoring at Level Creek, which has been impaired since 2003 for fecal coliform because of urban runoff. Level Creek is also impaired for biofish because its intended purpose is fishing, but people currently cannot fish there.
So we do bacterial and chemical monitoring at 4 locations on Level Creek. The first one, our base site, is Goldmine Drive, and then we monitor at 3 other sites called, 3 other tributaries, Spring Hill Drive, First Avenue, and Pinecrest Drive.
The first we went targeted monitoring, we noticed bacteria levels at Pinecrest Drive were too numerous to count. However, the chemical data did not reflect the high bacteria count. So we went again to Pinecrest Drive a few weeks later, and again the bacteria levels were TNTC. We brought this to the attention of our local coordinator who sent an investigator to Pinecrest Drive, and they found out that the reason there was high bacteria count was because of an overflowing sanitary sewer. The sanitary sewer was fixed and the levels returned back to normal. We will continue monitoring Level Creek for 1 more year, after which we'll evaluate the data we have collected and adjust our targeting route. So if we're noticing in one area of Level Creek, we're constantly getting high bacteria count or very low DO count, then we'll add more streams, we'll add more locations there to identify the possible location of pollution. And if we're noticing that somewhere else we're constantly getting good numbers, then we might remove sites from that location. We will also collaborate with the local regulatory program to contribute our data for delisting Level Creek. Since we're citizen scientists, our data alone won't be able to justify any actions regarding Level Creek status as an impaired stream. However, our data will be able to give the agency a better picture of Level Creek's health, which may help to delist it.
We would like to thank Mr. Don Butler, Water Resources Outreach Manager with the Department of Water Resources of Gwinnett County Government, and our mom, Ms. Archana Say, leader of Clean and Beautiful Monitoring Group, for helping us with our presentation. Thank you.
Wonderful job. All right, does anyone have any questions? Feel free to put them in the chat box, or you can unmute yourself and ask. I have a question for you ladies. So what made you want to get involved with monitoring Level Creek?
So we were doing monitoring at Sims Lake, which is near Suwannee, what's in Suwannee. And then we wanted to like monitor at more sites. So when we were going to get certified to do chemical monitoring, we met Mr. Butler and we like asked him where else we can monitor, and he told us about this program he was trying to implement about targeted monitoring, and then we thought it was interesting, so that's how we got into it.
See, do we have any questions for our presenters?
So after so after your year is up, so I guess you said you were planning to work with John Butler to kind of assess where things were then. What do you think? I mean, I guess like if the stream, if y'all don't need to start monitoring there anymore, what are you guys gonna do with your, I guess, information that you collected? Are you planning to a paper, or is it something that you want to continue on different streams, like with a different watershed or different creek, the SID program? I guess I'm just like far future.
We'll continue to monitor Level Creek for another year. So even if the data is where it should be, having more data is always better, because in the SID program, they always monitor for at least 2 years. So we'll monitor for 2 years, and then afterwards we'll reassess if we need to continue monitoring, if we provide enough data, and if that's so, then we might find another stream to monitor, and if that's not, then we'll figure out where we need to continue monitoring, and we'll go from there.
Awesome. Thanks. Interesting project, y'all. This is really amazing that y'all took this on, and of course I know y'all already got the award, but your hard work is definitely paying off. We appreciate all of your data you put in the data too, so it's really great.
Thank you.
Yes, I had a quick question. Because so you said you noticed the high levels of bacteria counts, the TNTC. Did you see anything in your chemical data in those parameters that maybe alarmed you too, or no?
So the first time we got TNTC, but there was nothing in our chemical data that was like weird. Mm-hmm. So that's why we like waited a little while, and then we monitored again in November, and we got TNTC again, and our DO levels were really low. So that's when we contacted Mr. Butler and like told him that something's wrong.
And then something I would like to add to that is we think that the first time, in retrospect, now that we have more data, the DO levels were like lower than they are now, but we didn't have the baseline data to compare it against. And then also we think the reason the DO levels weren't significantly lower is because there probably wasn't like enough pollution in the creek for the DO levels to go really low, but then later on there was.
I see. Wow. Well, that's great work that you ladies have done. Just like, I wish we could all just give a round of applause like we were in person, but we can all give a virtual round of applause to you. Yes, I love the little Zoom emojis, however you call them, symbols. Thank you, Bailey. All right. Well, if no one else has any questions, we'll do one more second, one more. You got a big, great job from Mike and Sabrina. So wonderful job, ladies. Thank you so much. And we'll go on to our second presenter for the evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so let's see. Second up, we have Sabrina Hodges, which I saw your name. So one moment, let me just bump you up so you can share your screen, Sabrina. Okay, so Sabrina entered our session on the undergraduate level, and she is affiliated with the College of Coastal Georgia and the Glenn Environmental Coalition. And she turned in her research under her advisor, Dr. James Deany. So hello, Sabrina, good to see you.
Hi, thanks for approving my research.
Yes, well, you had a wonderful abstract. So whenever you're ready to present, you can share your screen and the floor is yours.
Is it sharing correctly? There we go. Okay, so my project was looking at doing water quality evaluation so that I can assess how a waste transfer facility affects the storm drainage system. So waste transfer facilities, a lot of people don't know about them. They are very economically beneficial. So they provide reduced transportation costs, low energy use. They also provide community members with easy trash or recyclable material drop-off so that, you know, people aren't just dumping on the sides of the road, or they're just not letting it pile up in their house so they don't have to drive to the landfill. They also allow for removable hazardous waste and recovering recyclable items for people who don't recycle or can't recycle. They actually have a permit for recycling items. But just as they're beneficial, they are also not. They have negative impacts on the environment and surrounding communities. This could be through air quality, water quality, health and safety of community members, and economic impacts. They could be economically beneficial in providing reduced transportation costs, but usually where they're located is controversial because they're next to sometimes residential neighborhoods like we're going to see in our project. So they have they're economically put down because their like house cost is going down, so they can't sell what they would like to. And so what we mainly are going to be focusing on today is water quality. So our focus for the study is Liberty Roll-Ups and Recycling. It's a waste transfer facility in Brunswick. It's been operating since 2009, and they had to take on permits before they were even allowed to begin working. It is a cause for concern where they are because they're located right next to a residential neighborhood called Magnolia Park. And these residents have been very vocal in their concerns in the city commission and community gatherings. They have a neighborhood planning assembly with Magnolia Park and College Park, another neighborhood, where they get together. And I've been to multiple of their meetings trying to report what I've been doing for them. And then in about 2018, they brought their concerns to the Glenn Environmental Coalition. And since then, the GEC has been advocating and working for these residents so they can provide some environmental justice, some kind of relief from the concerns that they're having. My project was created in 2019. I was actually introduced to the executive director, her name's Rachel, Thompson. I was introduced to her by my advisor. This was a service learning project for me. It was an internship. And so the purpose of this study was to understand the water quality conditions of stormwater drainage systems, and kind of determine if there's any contamination. And if there's contamination, can we determine the source? And so for the objectives for this project, so we had to evaluate site locations and identify possible discharge points to see if they were managing their effluent correctly. We analyzed chemical and bacterial parameters for each water quality sample, and then we also evaluated water quality trends and conditions to identify any possible contaminations and if we could find source pollution. So as you can see, if you can see my cursor, what I'm circling right now, that is Liberty Roll-Ups and Recycling, and right here is the neighborhood. And so I'm going to go through this really quick, but this is a progression from when they started to where they are now. Thankfully, we were able to get a flyover by somebody up here in St. Simon's Island to show us kind of what the facility looks like so we could get an updated map. And so we had to do on-site observations to try to determine where we were going to sample and what really was going on. And so you see, we're having a lot of foam. There's a lot of algae. The water's green. That is caused that there might be some kind of contamination there. So we chose 6 months to sample so that we could get a standard baseline for what the water quality was. So from June and November, we sampled once a week. And then from July to October, we only sampled once a month. We sampled once a week, June and November, so that we could get that first baseline and then that second baseline in November. I used GIS and drainage maps and on-site observations to choose 6 sampling sites for where discharge possibly could be. And so here, all of those white lines, those are the drainage system. It actually goes through to Academy Creek. And so on here, I have site 4, 5, and 6. These are my light industrial sites. So all of those buildings on that side are businesses, and there's electricians there. And then sites 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, and 3, right here, that's Magnolia Park. I had to figure out a way to get to these sampling sites because I was not able to go onto the property of Liberty Roll-Ups and Recycling. So I had to use property maps, and I had to get permission from business owners and community members so that I would be able to get better access to these areas. So I looked at dissolved oxygen, water and air temperature, pH, conductivity, nitrates, phosphates, and E. coli. They were all of those were done on site, except for the E. coli. Those were taken in Whirl packs and then processed in my office. And then all of the samples were taken using QA/QC procedures from Georgia's upstream program. So for statistical analysis, I did time series plots to show the long-term trends, and we can kind of see seasonal variation through that. And I also looked at using Pearson's correlation coefficient with a significance level of 0.05. So this is telling me if there's a positive or negative or no correlation between each site. And I did that for all of the sites as a whole. And then I separated them by light industrial and the Magnolia Park. So here in this right corner, this is our dissolved oxygen time series plot. So the DO standard for Georgia is about 6.5 to 8 milligrams per liter. There are only 2 instances, any sites ever reaching the standard. That has to do with the fact that these are stormwater drainage systems, so they are standing water. They don't really mix. And sometimes sites 4 through 6, they did flow really well, but sites 1 through 3 really weren't moving. I really couldn't tell which was upstream and which was downstream. And then over here we have our water temperature and our air temperature. So you can start to see on both sides on the beginning from June to July to August, they are really, really high. And then you start to get down to the middle over here and you start seeing that, oh, the temperatures are dropping. And that's actually really good to see. following the seasonal variation, because water holds heat really, really well. So you want to start seeing those colder temperatures coming into the water. So one of the most important things that I did was E. coli sampling. And so the standard for E. coli is 1,000 colony forming units per 100 milliliters. I had 3 sites that were over that limit in the very beginning. After that, I had only one with site 4. And then this is my correlation matrix. So what this does is this compares all of them. So it will compare all the conductivity, all the water temperature, all the dissolved oxygen, and kind of tell me which ones are significantly correlated. So here we have air temperature and water temperature, which obviously those are going to have a strong correlation with themselves. And they have that all for all sample sites 1 through 3, and sample sites 1 through 6. Something to notice though, the little stars are what can tell you about the significance. So some of them we have a negative number, and a negative number means that not that there's no correlation, but it has a negative correlation. So for example, water temperature and E. coli have a positive correlation. However, water conductivity and air temperature have a negative correlation, which just means that as one increases, the other decreases. So the results of the study, they show that there is some sort of contamination. However, there's no source that can be distinguished. And I can't say that it's Liberty Roll-Offs and recycling. Something that happened in the very beginning of my research was that they started using goats. The city started using goats as mowers instead of bringing in these industrial mowers to get into these little areas. They brought goats, and the goats pooped all over my sample site. So that is a reason why I had such high E. coli standards there. And then something that happened 2 times at the very end of my sampling, and I was only able to get one event, is that I witnessed runoff from the facility after huge rain events, which means that there is a chance they are causing an impact onto the surrounding ecosystem, but there needs to be future research to understand how this facility truly affects the water quality and surrounding ecosystem, because 6 months isn't long enough to kind of understand the actual trends. I'd like to thank Glen Environmental Coalition for facilitating this research for me and providing me support and an opportunity to help my community. And I'd also like to thank the College of Coastal Georgia Water Resource Lab. They provided me with the GIS that I needed to use, the R programming that I needed to use my statistical analysis. And I'd like to thank Georgia Adopt Stream for training and guidance and allowing me to come and present my research with you guys.
Thank you, Sabrina. That was wonderful. Well, we have a question right off the bat here in the chat. So Cecilia wants to know, did you sample right after you saw the runoff coming from the plant? If so, were there any significant findings?
So I did. Actually, let me go back here. So I don't know if you can see the conductivity in the corner, but sorry, I can't see it. The faces are in front of it. So if you look right here in the corner where you see that huge low dip and that huge spike, that was one of the events that we had. That was one of my normal sampling days. I went out in my waders and I had to go right into the drainage ditch. Conductivity was really high after that, but there wasn't any other kind of parameters that were way too high. It was really just conductivity. However, I did try to sample for nitrates and phosphates, and they were a part of this project, but because they were so significantly low that I couldn't include them, because they wouldn't have made a difference in the water quality because there wasn't enough presence.
Betty wants to know, how did you become interested in water issues? And are you majoring in an environmental course of study?
So I really like water. It's actually one of the main things that I do at the College of Coastal Georgia, so I am an environmental science major. I'm studying natural sciences with a minor in geology, and hopefully I'm working towards getting a chem minor as well. I actually started getting into water science my sophomore year. I presented at Georgia Water Resources up in UGA. I did a storm surge modeling project using GIS to predict storm surge flows with sea level rise. And it was amazing. I have it hanging up on my wall. I love looking at it. The maps are so beautiful. But I really like science, and it really got me into like climate change, and really it's the reason I changed my major to environmental science. I think that water is always changing, and you can always keep learning from it.
I love that. I love to hear, you can really hear your enthusiasm and like passion for the science. So that's awesome, Sabrina. Does anybody else have any questions? Feel free to put them in the chat or unmute yourself. I have a question. You kind of touched on it at the end of how you would further the science, or how you would just further this project. What is it exactly that you want to, or you would be interested in looking at in particular?
So something that happens when you have like runoff like that and contamination is you have soil contamination. However, we have tried to go down that pathway because of the Superfund sites, Brunswick Cat. If there's soil contamination, some of the time it will just be because of the Superfund sites. But you have soil contamination. You can look at like amphibians, macroinvertebrates, vegetation studies. So if you're having certain stuff grow and other stuff not grow because they're vulnerable, and that there's a contamination like too much nitrates, too many phosphates, you know, you can kind of use that as an indicator. And something that I'm really interested in is vegetated storm ditches. It's something that a lot of cities are doing. So instead of you know, building these storm drains up and you know, covering them with something, they use concrete or they use that layering plastic, they're planting native trees and native plants and allowing that to absorb that water during storms to help mitigate the flood risk. And if that's something that we could start doing, and I could look at seeing if that would help with the stormwater runoff, that would be amazing. And it would be something that is beneficial. So you'd cut down on the materials that are used in cost, and you'd have a natural system just working and flowing and, you know, taking out the water. It actually, plants are really good filters for the water in general, you know, and something that I think we could benefit from is looking at vegetated storm ditches.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thanks. There was sorry, I'll just jump in. I'm kind of leaving it all up to Jackie here. She's doing a great job. But we did have another question in the chat from Mike. He wants to know, does the facility have customers drop waste under an awning or a roof, or are there open areas? And also, do you know if they have a detention pond for runoff?
So I have never truly been onto the facility site. I don't live in Brunswick, so I used to drive up all the time and do my sampling. But I do know that you can rent the large trash bins from them that they put at industrial waste sites. You can rent those from them. You can just drop off your trash to them. I do believe it is an awning, but I'm not sure. They do, what is it? They also take recyclable materials, and they do mulch composting as well. But I'm not super sure on how they do the rest of their, you know, they take the trash, but the retention pond. They do have a pond on their facility, but they not, as of right now, from when I did my study, they did not have a permit for a detention pond. You have to have a permit for one to have that onto your property. And I could be wrong. They could have gotten one. I could have missed it, but I never saw one for them. So you have to have, because of the water runoff, and you have to protect that. You can't just have a detention pond, you have to have a permit for it. And so what they're supposed to be doing is they're supposed to be washing off all of their trucks, and taking any water runoff that they have and storing it in a tank before they can take it to, I think it's in the water treatment facility in Blackshear. And they're supposed to do pre-treatments before they send it over there, so it's not toxic and there's not as much hazardous material in there from, the trash that they take.
Yeah, Mike says, thanks. Seems they should be permanent or at least follow stormwater ordinances. So hopefully that is the case moving forward for them. We can always hope, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is super, super interesting. I chatted with you briefly, like I think at the start or maybe right after you're starting this project. And wow, you really did some work there. You were out.
Oh, yeah. There's 2 years in the making. I know. I have spent so long on the computer doing R programming, which is a statistical programming thing, and it is very frustrating sometimes because if you capitalize a letter, it'll say it's all wrong. But it was really fun. I really I like the graphs. I like doing that stuff. So this was a really fun project, and I really liked working with the Glen Environmental Coalition as the water quality coordinator and their intern. Really, I like helping my community, and I liked going out and supporting events and teaching people how to sample water safely, and protect their environment.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks so much, Sabrina.
Well, my pleasure. Thank you guys so much.
All right, well, we'll move on to our third presenter. So we have Isabella Powell. Hello, Isabella. See you on screen.
Hello.
So last but certainly not least, we have Isabella, and she is joining us. She's a student at Rockdale Magnet School for Science and Technology. So she entered at the high school level, and her teacher is Miss Shelley Seagraves. But Isabella, the floor is yours. You can take it away.
Okay. Are you able to see my screen?
Yeah, now we see your PowerPoint. You just click from beginning. Okay, yeah, now it's on the.
Okay, great. Thank you. So I'm Isabella. I'm a sophomore at the Rockdale Magnet School for Science and Technology, and my project was the effects of submersible aquatic plants on stream water quality. So a little bit of background before I get started. The research was conducted in the stream in my backyard because we haven't been at school all year. We've been completely virtual. And so we just returned like 3 weeks ago. So I didn't have access to a lab. So everything was done at home. And the stream is located in the Upper Okmulgee watershed. And I tested the stream weekly from May all the way to December. And I'm still doing testing now. I picked it back up after Regional Science Fair. So this project was designed to invest the water quality of the stream and to determine if the water quality was improved by submersible aquatic plants. And so my hypothesis was that the plants would decrease the concentrations of nitrates and phosphates and increase the concentration of dissolved oxygen, the biological oxygen demand, and the pH of the water. And my null hypothesis was that the plants would have no effect on the water quality of the stream. So I began my project, like I said, in May. I was bored during quarantine, so I thought, why not start my project? And so I began doing some baseline testing, just control tests. So I went down to the stream and just collected water with no plants in it. And then once the school year started, I found out what plants that I wanted to test, and I ordered them. They came in kind of late, so I didn't start testing until September. And so I started with testing Elodea densa. However, I lost all of my plants down the stream after a storm.
and so my data was all gone, and I had to restart my project with the plants. So I put the Vallisneria in the water, and that's where I picked up when I made this presentation. And currently I'm testing the Chara, but that didn't get started until about February because I had regional science fair and I had to write some papers and my abstract for science fair. And now I'm advanced to the state science fair. So those interviews will be in a few weeks. And so I used onion sacks, as you can see in the picture, and I tied them up with string the second time so I didn't lose them in another storm because that was really sad. And I put my little flow chart on the side. It just shows my thought process of how I was doing my research. So my results, this is just the results for the Vallisneria because my Elodia, obviously I can record that data, it was all gone, and the Chara has not yet been factored into these graphs. So for the Vallisneria, the nitrates had a downward trend. As you can see, there was one slight little fluctuation, but that was just from, I believe, a storm or maybe just a storm or some extra runoff that might have gotten into the water, but it was gone the next week. And so I had an overall 85.7% decrease in the concentration of nitrates. My phosphates also decreased. As you can see, it kind of increased as soon as I put the plants in, but then it quickly just decreased again. And it went all the way down to 0, which is great. I had a 73.6% decrease, and this is all calculated from the averages from my control tests and my final tests. My pH was kind of stabilized around 6. You can see before I put my plants in, it was fluctuating between 5 and 6, and then my plants just kept it at a baseline of 6 every week. And the turbidity, there was no change. My stream is only about 6 inches deep, and you can see straight to the bottom, there was never any difference. My dissolved oxygen went up by quite a bit. So it started at around 46, and then as I added my plants, you can see from the graph that it increased to 81 at the highest, 81% saturation. And so that was a 33.6% increase from what I had originally tested in my baseline tests. My biological oxygen demand also increased, and it went from fluctuating between 4 and 0 to 4 and then finally 8. And I saw a 154% increase, which is pretty great in the stream. There's usually a few fish, but nothing too much. And then once I added the plants, there were more fish around where I had been testing. So in conclusion, my submersible aquatic plants could be used to improve the following aspects of water quality: nitrates, phosphates, dissolved oxygen, and biological oxygen demand. And they can also be used to stabilize pH. And this project could also be implemented on a larger scale in society to improve water quality in local streams. So I would just like to thank my research teachers, Ms. Seagraves and Mr. Robinson, for helping me develop this project, and Ms. Kennan, Ms. Powell, and my dad for all mentoring me and supervising my project.
Great job, Isabella.
Thank you.
Does anybody have any questions?
I have a question. Yeah, so I really liked your presentation. How did you think of doing this? Like, why did you do this project? Like, how did you think of it?
So last year I took oceanography at my school. It was one of the electives. And so we went down to the stream in our school's yard. It's kind of off to the side, and we tested the water. The water quality was not great. So I wanted to just think of some ways that I could improve stream water quality. And I'm also really interested in like green chemistry. And so I thought of a way that I could do it without introducing anything harmful into the streams. And so I came up with this project, and I looked up some plants that could reduce, phosphates and nitrates. and increased dissolved oxygen and biological oxygen demand. And I wound up with these 3 plants.
Okay. Yeah, great presentation.
Thank you.
Mike wants to know if you can talk about your process of measuring, I just lost it, BOD. So that was biological oxygen demand? Right?
Yes. So I had a little vial and I filled it up with water all the way so there was no oxygen or any air left in it. And then I closed it up and wrapped it in tinfoil and kept it in my garage for 5 days. And then after the 5 days was up, I put the dissolved oxygen tablets in there and measured it. And that was how I came up with those numbers. And so that was just the instructions from my water testing kit.
I have a question. Oh, Mike says, wonderful, and thank you for elaborating. My question is, did you have a way of securing your plants? I know you said you lost some the first time because they kind of floated downstream. But yeah, did you have a way of securing them, or did you just kind of like put them in there and kind of plant them essentially in the stream?
So I put them in the onion sacks like we're in that picture, and then I also put a plastic rod through them and stuck it down into the riverbed. And so they were secured through that, but they still somehow came off of the rods and went downstream. So I ran a string through all of the bags and tied it to trees on the banks on the second trial, just to make sure that nothing came off.
Okay, yeah. I was just wondering because I know that probably must have been frustrating for you when they
Yeah.
all downstream. But also some of these could be like potentially I don't know what's the word, non-native species, right? So I didn't know if that was something you took into consideration if you're going to plan to leave them here or take them out, or if you're going to keep monitoring, or what your plan was with that.
Yes. So some of them are non-native, but they were all kept in the sacks and they weren't allowed to spread because they weren't tested for very long, so they couldn't take root. And so they were all removed before they could become invasive.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We do have a question from Cecilia as well. Firstly, she says, congratulations on moving on to the state science fair. That's awesome. But she also says, is this the project you're presenting on, or are you working on something else as well?
This is the project that I'm presenting on. This is my science fair project for this year. So each year at my school, we do a research project and then we present all of our data at science fair.
That's very cool. I wish I didn't have a science fair like that. That sounds like an excellent opportunity. What was my question? Oh, yes. Came back to me. So are you interested in furthering your project more, or, maybe seeing what happens?
So next year, Yeah, next year I'm planning on either testing different types of plants or doing other tests of different variables. And also I would like to do a lab test because next year I'll have access to a lab since we're back at school. This year I was just at home, so I didn't have access to anything that I could use. Like I didn't have an incubator, so I couldn't really do bacteria tests, but I would like to really get into that too.
Great. Does anybody else have any questions for Isabella?
Mike suggests choosing native plants in your next study to see if that makes a difference.
Yes, I will.
Very interesting.
I plan to leave the next plants in a little bit longer instead of just for a month, because I have all year now. Since I've gotten my project started, I can start testing probably around the summer, and then I can test all throughout the summer and do more extensive trials.
Cool.
Great.
Okay,
Well,
thank you so much.
Well, thank you for joining us, and thank you to all of our presenters from this evening. You all did a wonderful job presenting your research projects, and it's very cool to see what what our volunteers and students are doing, and I'm glad you had this opportunity to share it with the Adopt a Stream community. So that concludes the session. We do have a few closing remarks and reminders before we can go on to the social couple minutes after this. So if you haven't already, be sure to follow Adopt a Stream on Instagram and Facebook to keep up with all the events that we'll have going on. Also, be sure to check out the Confluence session page on our website to register for more events that are coming up this week. We have part 2 of our water science research session tomorrow evening, same time, 7 o'clock. So if you're not registered for that, be sure to come out. We have 3 more presenting groups. So that'll be really exciting to see what they're up to. And we also have our first ever Wonder of Water weekend. So there's a page on our website with a list of events. If you look at it, you can find an event in different areas of Georgia, find one that's local to you, or we just encourage you to get out for the weekend and go take a hike by a water body or monitor a stream. And if you're not able to join any of these sessions, of course, they will be posted on our YouTube page and resources and recordings page as well. And all of these should be in the chat. All these links. Yep.
Yeah, I just popped those in there. There's a couple in there too. One of them is a session survey. So if you wouldn't mind taking the time following this session just to fill that survey out so that we can take your feedback and make this session and future sessions better, we would greatly appreciate that. You'll also get an email following this session with that link. And then, as always, if you have any questions for us as state staff or just about the program in general, please feel free to email that Adopt a Stream email address that's there at the close to the bottom. And then last but not least, we do have some cool t-shirts this year. So if you guys are interested in checking those out, Cecilia helped design those. We have 3 different colors and they're long sleeve t-shirts, which if you can't tell, are my favorite. So yeah, feel free to check those out. They're pretty cheap and they're shipped right to your door. And I think that's all for this evening. So again, yeah, thanks for joining us.